How could the NFL use game theory and mechanism design to find a solution to the complications created by canceling the Bills-Bengals game due to the Damar Hamlin injury? My name's Matt Rosu. I have taught economics for over 20 years, game theory classes for over 15 years, and I make content trying to make economics relatable, often using pop culture references and how economics and pop culture are intertwined. So, want to back up on how game theory methods could be helpful. When thinking about game theory, what the initial teaching, if you've ever been taught a little bit of game theory in classes, but perhaps not too much, is often a professor will give you a game and you solve the game. The most common is the prisoner's dilemma game, where you'd have two prisoners, they're locked in different cells, they're both offered some sort of immunity or some time off of a sentence if they confess and implicate the other person. It's a classic game theory game. The person gets the game and they solve it, and they find an equilibrium. When you get a little bit more advanced in game theory, though, you get to what I think is more interesting and much more applicable in the real world. And that is flipping the problem around, where you are not given a game and you try to find out what is the solution. You start with what would be an optimal solution? What would be the characteristics of an optimal solution? And how can we set up the rules of the game to get us to that optimal solution? That is a branch of game theory called mechanism design. So the problem the NFL has right now, right? They canceled the Bills-Bengals game after that horrible Damar Hamlin collapse. And before moving on, just want to express prayers to Damar and his family. I was actually at the Pittsburgh University of Virginia basketball game the day after, somewhat as a total coincidence. And he was a Pitt alma mater, and there was a tribute there on the screen, and it was really quite moving. I think everybody is just really hopeful and praying that there's continued improvement. That said, right, the game was canceled, I think rightly so, and the NFL has decided that they're not going to reschedule. And as of now, there's no set rule on what's going to happen. By the time you watch this, there might be. But I think everything we talk about will still apply in terms of how game theory helps. So the game, the Bills and the Bengals, had really big implications for the number one seed in the AFC. For those who aren't as familiar with football, I suspect most are, but for those who aren't, the number one seed gets a bye week, a week off, where they don't have to play anybody and they still advance to the next round of the playoffs. Plus, they will get home field advantage all the way through the playoffs up until the Super Bowl, which is at a neutral site. So it's a significant, huge advantage in increasing your probability of making the Super Bowl, always being able to play at home and having that bye week. With the game canceled, the Chiefs now have the inside track, the Kansas City Chiefs, on this bye. But the Bills, if all they had to do was beat the Bengals and win their final game, win 2 games, and they would have been the number one seed instead of the Chiefs. But by that game being forfeited, they no longer control their own destiny. If the Chiefs win, the Chiefs are just automatically in the number one seed. The Bengals actually also had a shot at it, because if the Bengals won the game against the Bills and their last game, should the Chiefs have lost, the Bengals would have been the number one seed in the AFC. So what's to be done? Well, backing up a bit, let's explain a little bit more on mechanism design. So with mechanism design, you have an outcome in mind, and you try to set up the rules of the game so that when people play the game, quote unquote, you get to the solution that you wanted. So there's rules of the game to follow, and you're trying to figure out, can you get to what's economists would call an incentive compatible outcome, where the rules of the game that you set up lead to the desired Nash equilibrium. And the suggestion, at least what I go through, the step-by-step that I talk about, that the textbooks that I talk when I'm teaching my students game theory, says 4 steps. And somewhat these are common sense, but quite honestly, a lot of game theory is common sense. It's step-by-step, logical, ordered thinking, but hopefully this will make sense, what we're talking about here. One is you start with an initial set of rules. So the NFL should start by saying, okay, what if we did it this specific way? You take the rules, you determine what the Nash equilibrium is given the rules. And here, this is where it's a little bit, you're applying game theory to real life. What's meant by the Nash equilibrium? I think you're looking at how does this affect all of the teams, and which teams would think this is most and or least fair, given the circumstances. If the results are not satisfactory, you try again. You change the rules again. You come up with a second set of rules. Once the rules seem to yield the equilibrium, the appropriate Nash equilibrium, you suggest they're adopted. So it's kind of a step-by-step, right? It's trial and error. You take a set of rules, you see what would happen. Now, if you're thinking about a multi-layered game, you take the set of rules, you solve out the full game, and then you see what happens. Here, applying mechanism design to the NFL, what you would do is take the set of rules, and then you'd look on a team-by-team basis, does this seem to be fair for the parties involved? And the main parties involved really are the Chiefs, the Bengals, the Bills, although there is some discussion also of the Ravens, because if the Bengals had lost out, the Ravens would have had a shot at being a division winner and getting a home game in that first playoff game. So what's actually going to be done about this? I don't want to speculate, and by the time many of you watch this, you'll see what happens. I mean, there's been some discussions on should there be an 8th playoff team? Should there be neutral sites involved? Should there be coin flips? There's all sorts of different options that are at play. But game theory and mechanism design very much could help the NFL with this particular problem. Once again, I say problem here. This is really nothing compared to Mr. Hamlin's health. And once again, prayers for a speedy recovery. But I hope this short video helped explain some of the thought process behind how to use game theory and mechanism design for this one application of the NFL to reschedule with given this situation. I'm Matt Rosu. I make videos on economics and pop culture regularly. So if you like this, please click like and please consider subscribing to get more content. Look forward to seeing you in the next video.